Hey guys, Old Guy Gaming here, back again with another MTG Arena video, and tonight we're going to be covering the top 10 cards I will not miss after rotation. That's right, we're a little bit over a month away from rotation actually happening, which means some good things and bad things for Standard. What it does means it takes some problematic cards that we've never really enjoyed playing against and takes them out of rotation for Standard, but it also takes away some of the cards that we've loved and enjoyed playing with out of Standard as well. So I'm going to start off on the dark side tonight, and I'm going to cover over the cards that I'm not looking forward to never playing again, at least in Standard. Anyway, they'll be in Historic, they'll still be around, so if you are new to MTG Arena and you own these cards, don't worry, you will still be able to play with these cards, but you have to play with them in Historic because they will be rotating out of Standard when the Ravnica the Zendikar Rising set comes out. All of these cards are going to be rotating out. So I did this beautiful little PowerPoint presentation for everyone. We're going to go into these. So I do have a couple of honorable mentions, cards that were annoyances and, you know, things that weren't fun to play against, but they didn't really necessarily, in my opinion, break the game or make it unfun to play against. They were just irritating. So let's start off with the first one, of course, which is going to be Risen Reef. This card I thought was going to get a lot more traction than it did. When it early came out in M21, all of the elemental spam that came out and the abilities on this card to allow you to draw cards, put lands into play, like it felt like a very broken card, and for a really long time it really was. Like elementals, even to this day, you'll still find some teamer decks that still run with Risen Reef. Anything that allows you to put things into play or draw lots of cards for free really feels like it breaks the mechanics of the game. Being able to put a land into play tapped, okay, that's not necessarily so bad, but it was all of the card draw that came in and associated with this. And then what would happen, of course, because it's so easy to cast, you'd end up casting 4 of these and seeing like 2 or 3 of these on the play field same. So you're dropping 2 or 3 lands at the same time. You're drawing multiple cards whenever you're going through, and it just made the elemental, especially the teamer elemental deck alone, was it was a beast. It really was. It was something horrifying to deal with, and there wasn't really a lot you could do about it unless you wiped the board and got the Risen Reef off the board. In the latter part of Standard, where we are now, you don't really see this card that often, which is why it's only an honorable mention, but I was genuinely concerned when this card was sneak previewed and we saw these starting to leak out in the internet, and I was like, how is that a thing? How is this a card that I'm going to have to deal with in Standard? And for a while, it really was. It was a pain in the neck to deal with. Not a lot of fun. Of course, everyone's going to say, and I know every one of these cards is going to be like, well, you can counter it, or you can, it dies to a shock. And you're right, it does die to removal, but just because a card dies to removal doesn't mean that it's any less broken. If you don't have removal in your hand, or your deck doesn't particularly play with removal, you end up getting behind the 8 ball really, really fast behind the elemental decks that this card was part of. So, kind of happy that it's going to be gone. I'm not going to lie. Next on the list, Nikki B, the Dragon God. So we didn't see a lot. When you got into the Grixis control decks, which were really big right around the time that War of the Sparks were coming out, there was the other Nicol Bolas that was M19 that was still in there, and then you get the accompanying Dragon God. This card just was a feel-bad moment, because normally it was going to be in some type of control deck, so because it's running black and it has to run 3 black to get it, you're going to get a lot of things like Rituals of Soot, which almost made the list, or you're going to be getting Cry of the Carnarium, what was going to be wiping the board out. So you didn't really have a lot on the board because they've also got blue and red and they're countering stuff and they're shocking stuff off the board. So by the time that Nikki B hit the table, he was going up to -8 really, really quick. And it was just, again, it was one of those cards that just didn't feel good playing against it. It wasn't ever a lot of fun. And by the time Nikki B came down, that was usually the point in time that you scooped, because at that juncture, unless you had, at the time, unless you had some type of Planeswalker removal in your hand at the time, you weren't going to catch up. So this is one of those cards that was a not feel good kind of moment, at least for me. Again, keeping in mind all of my views come from a very casual, like I'm not a super heavy oriented tournament, have to play the top meta decks. Like that's not me, that's not my playstyle, but because, you know, that is what's in Arena, When you'd come across Grixis decks that ran this card, it just didn't feel fun to play against them. So super happy that Nikki B is no longer going to be in Standard. Having said that, I'm also really kind of happy that the whole War of the Spark, Nicol storylines kind of come to the end. The Gatewatch alone, we've been following them since Zendikar. like we've been following the Gatewatch and their story for multiple sets now. I'm kind of happy to see them go. The only thing I did think was cool, and I know a lot of people weren't big fans of the set. I personally was, because it was really cool, was the Amonkhet Hour of Devastation block. I know that you got the Scarab God that came out of Hour of Devastation when he was bad, broken, and I'm not looking forward to seeing him come back into Historic whenever they do his anthologies for... I'm sorry, it was Amonkhet Remastered. I'm sure he's going to be in that set, and I'm not looking forward to seeing that card in Historic again. But that was kind of cool because it kind of scratched a couple of itches for me. It kind of scratched the undead itch, because I love my zombies. If you've watched this channel long enough, you should know that I'm a big fan of zombies. And so it kind of scratched that itch because you had zombies from all different kinds of colors. But it also had that Egyptian kind of look and feel, so I really did like that one. This one, not so much. So happy it's gone. All right, so let's get into some real ones. Let's get into the real ones that I'm really happy are no longer going to be a thing anymore. Mass Manipulation, part of the other control decks. Granted, it is for blue. I get it. This is another one of those not feel good moments that when it comes out into the battlefield. By this point in time, they've normally these ended up in the Sultai ramp decks too, or even just the blue-green. Why am I drawing a blank on that? It'll come to me. The ramp decks that were just going to be able to counter everything you did, remove it from the board, and then, oh, by the way, by the time you built something up, they're just going to mass manipulation it and pull it onto their side, and you're just going to win just off of this one card. It does have a high casting cost. I'm not saying that the card's broken by any stretch of the imagination, because it's not. I mean, at minimum, to take one thing, it's costing 6. I totally get it. But having that +X in a deck that also included cards that allowed you to ramp faster meant that you got to this card faster. So super happy that Mass Manipulation is no longer going to be a thing in Standard. Deputy of Detention. Oh boy, am I glad you're going away. So we have a lot of quote-unquote prison cards in Standards. You have things like, at the time of this recording, Conclave Tribunal, Banishing Light. We've got a whole bunch of those kind of cards that I put this on your card and it goes away, and that's kind of the end of it. Sure, oh darn, you got one of my creatures off the board, or you got one of my permanents off the board that I kind of needed, but, you know, good on you, you kind of got that one. Deputy of Detention basically gave you a middle finger whenever he did it, because not only could you not only did you lose your creature when Deputy of Detention came into play, but then you couldn't cast any others like it until Deputy of Detention went off the board. Super controlly. So, like, if you, for example, were only running... If you're running another control deck, for example, you only ran like 1 or 2 creatures, and Deputy of Detention took that creature off the board, you were screwed. You'd have to be able to wipe the board to get Deputy of Detention off the board and be able to get your thing back. If you're playing any other decks, like an aggro deck or anything like that, you're kind of stuck in this situation where now I have to get Deputy of Detention off the board first, because not only do I need to get my creature back that it took, or my permanent back that it took, but then I don't have the option to cast any others just from this one card. It seemed super powerful for 3 mana to be able to take a creature and then block you from casting it at the same time. So there was a similar spell, which was Return to Ixalan, I think it is, in the Ixalan set, that allowed you to do something similar, but it was in an enchantment. Enchantments are harder, so I felt that card was probably more broken than this one, because at least you could dies to removal. You could get a lightning strike or something on this card to get it off the way, or some other means of getting the creature off the board. But man, was this thing a no-feel-good creature whenever it came down, because of course it would be in Azorius colors, so it would be in an Azorius control deck, and their whole goal was to be able to prevent you from doing anything. If they couldn't wipe the board from you, if they couldn't counter you, they were just going to prevent you from being able to cast anything, which is just... It's just a no-feel-good card. So super happy that Deputy of Detention, goodbye, is leaving Standard. Growth Spiral. I think this one should be fairly obvious on the reasons why. Sultai decks, or the Sultai ramp decks, are going up there. The Simic deck, Simic's the word I was looking for, by the way. See, I knew something was going to kick off my memory. When this card was first revealed, it didn't seem all that innocuous. It didn't seem like that bad of a card. A common card, instant speed, draw a card, put a land into play. Didn't seem like that bad of a plan. But whenever you put it into the Simic decks that already had a ton of ramp going into it, it got out of control. And this card, this one single card, has been in almost every top tier meta deck since it released. It was a broken card whenever it came out and has stayed broken. But because it came in at the common level, and I mean, it's not that bad, but it was bad enough because of the decks that it went into, that it took over the meta. So like even right now, there's other cards that are going to come out of this deck that you'll see here in my list, that basically made that deck just unbearable to play against. On its own, in its own, like if you were to just put it into a vacuum, the card itself isn't that bad. It was always the decks that it went into that became bad. And you're just gonna get tired of it. I'm so happy to see Grossbile rotate out, because I've had my fill of draw a card, drop a land, draw a card, drop a land, and then oh look, you're at 5 mana on the second turn. Like what the heck? One of the things that, like, the balancing factors of the game is mana, and fast mana in a game, too much fast mana in a game, really begins to break the game, really begins to break the foundations of fair play anyway. And this card was some of the contributing factors to that. So goodbye, Growth Spiral. As we were talking about before, one of the other things that we also got was Hydra Crisis, also going into that Simic deck, also building on the top of the ramp. This thing had so many things that just made this card so powerful. For starters, it's a flying trample creature that gets +X/+X whenever it's cast. And oh, by the way, you gain life and draw cards whenever it comes in. Like, what? Like, there's so much text. Like, if it did any one of these things, so like the flying trample with the +1/+1 counters, that's fantastic. But then we're going to draw, first of all, when you cast the spell, the Crisis doesn't even have to hit the table. It can be countered. And then the following two things still happen regardless of the fact that you counter it, which means there's nothing you can do, in that you gain life half of X, and oh, by the way, you draw half X cards as well. The whole card, everything about this card just screams overpowered. And it still remained. It remained in standard from the beginning until the end, from the time it came in Ravnica Allegiance all the way out through. And it's been a problem. It's been part of that problematic deck. It started off like it was Sultai ramp or not Sultai ramp, a Simic ramp for a really, really long time. It came down towards the latter part of the standard where Sultai really, like, they added the extra color in to kind of like really spice it up, to get it into the teamer colors and make it worse. But yeah, this card, whew. And I mean, sometimes people would cast it just to get a 2/2 on the table and just draw cards. Like, so I mean, it's this universal problem-solving card for control decks that, oh, by the way, leaves a flyer that happens to have trample behind with it. It's and again, it goes into this whole deck where the whole concept of the deck, the whole idea of the deck, is that it's just ramping up to these ungodly amount of mana. So like we've already talked about one card with Mass Manipulation that would be in almost every deck, like kind of in the sideboard, like you'd just be able to pull that off the sideboard and toss that in, and you've got things like Growth Spiral, and then you've got this card that even like it became almost their win condition, along with that shock bolt thing, which we'll get, is not on my list because I don't necessarily feel that card was necessarily the problem. It was other cards that built this deck, and this is another one of those cards that just really made that deck no fun to play against, and boy am I happy to see this one go. All right, so we're into number 6, so we're going to find the other most irritating deck currently in standard to play. It was weird the way this standard worked, and I don't know that this is necessarily fair to Priest of the Forgotten Gods, because of course we're going to be talking about the Raptor Sacrifice deck and how, you know, annoying that is. What ended up happening with the Raptor Sacrifice deck is that it was really, really good, and then a new standard came in with all these companions, and then we straightened out and fixed, quote unquote, the companion mechanic, and then banned things like Fires of Invention, which is not on this list. Any card that's been banned, at least like Field of the Dead being the top two, Field of the Dead and Fires of Invention, those two cards are not on my list because Wizards eventually came around, although it took some time with the Fires of Invention. So Wizards did eventually come around and decide to ban them out of standard. So if it's a banned card that did get removed, I'm not putting it on the list. But they left a power vacuum. So you had this whole new mechanic that was coming in with Ikoria with the companions, and then they got kind of hit with the nerf bat multiple times until they're almost unplayable. You do see a handful of them still in standard, but they're not in the power decks anymore, not like they were. And then you remove Firestorm Invention as the other power deck, and then what were you left with? You were left with what was ever good in the meta standard before that, which became Raptor Sacrifice. And then as much fun as M21 has brought some interesting cards, I don't feel that M21 brought a lot to the table as far as new standard combos. I'm there, and I recognize we're only we're only about a month or so into it, so there may be some cool combos that will still yet to come with other sets that are coming. But it doesn't feel like much of anything was really added from M21 as far as power level is concerned. So we've basically been living in this Rakdos Sacrifice standard for 6 months, and I am so happy that this card's finally going to go away. Love the artwork, beautiful card. Probably is going to be fun to play in Historic at some point in time, but really happy that this card's going away. And since we're on kicking a dead horse while it's down, let's give another good couple of swift kicks to Mayhem Devil. Obviously, it came with War of the Sparks. This is one of those things that just added on top of the sacrifice decks. You'll take note, of course, that the Kid in the Oven is not in this because guess what? Kid in the Oven isn't rotating out. That is in Throne of Eldraine, and Throne of Eldraine will still be here for another 6 months after that. So this isn't going anywhere for another year after that. So this is not, that part's not going anywhere. But this part of it, this is one of the cards that made that deck work. You had, excuse me, you had the ultimate, easy sacrifice conditions with like Woe Strider and Priest of the Forgotten Gods, and then you have the insult to injury damage that goes along with Mayhem Devil and sacrificing the kitties and then creating creatures, and then, oh, I'm going to steal your creature and sacrifice that and start doing all this damage. Like a vast majority of the damage coming off that deck came from this particular card. Again, love the artwork, really cool concept, and this is probably just deck fatigue speaking when I'm talking about this card, but I'm really done playing the Rakdos deck. I'm done playing against it. I'm done playing it to actually win because it is a really good, strong deck. And you'll take note that I'm not necessarily, quote-unquote, picking on the powerful decks, although as we get into these top 5, so it's probably going to be what you're going to say. It's just those decks that are just, for this particular instance, it's deck fatigue. I'm just done playing Rakdos. I'm so done playing against the same deck because it's the same deck. You know what's going to happen, and it's always the same play. And this card, of course, enabled that. One of the cards that enabled the deck. So I'm very happy that it is going to be rotating out in a month. Goodbye, Mayhem Devil. All right, so now we're getting to the good stuff. We're into the top 4. Number 4 on my list, Thought Erasure. I called this whenever it was sneak peeked. It has been a powerful card in Standard the entire time that it has been there. We haven't seen a lot of it recently because there are other decks that have kind of gone pushed through, but it is still, in my opinion, one of, if not the most powerful cards in Standard right now. Thought Erasure allows you to go in and on your second turn, look at your opponent's hand and take whatever card he needs out and remove him. And just removing a card, like if it was something like Duress or something like that, it wouldn't be so, maybe it wouldn't be so bad, but this gets to choose whatever you want. Whatever their win condition is, whatever their good combo is, whatever what they're going to do on the next turn, especially if they're pulling this on turn 1, whatever their 2-drop is or whatever their 3-drop is, whatever combo is coming out is now gone and your player is playing behind. I don't necessarily fundamentally have a problem with discard decks, period. They're one of my favorite decks to play, actually. I recognize that. But this one allows you to pull anything. Like sometimes you get the Duress, then you can, okay, you're going to pull a spell. Haha, I've got all creatures. Didn't do anything. Congratulations. Or you pulled 1 spell or 2 spell, but this one here can pick any card in your hand that's not a land and pull it out. And then, oh, by the way, on top of all of that, it gets Surveil. And what Surveil does is basically it's a free sneak peek of what's coming up in your deck and allowing you to stack the deck in your favor a little with Surveil. So powerful card, super powerful card. We haven't seen a ton of it in Standard recently, but I still think one of the strongest cards, and I'm very happy that it's rotating out. All right, we're into the top 3. If you don't know these top 3 cards, now mine not be in the same order that yours are, but these are 3 of the more irritating cards in Standard right now. Nissa, Who Shakes the World. Love the character, I genuinely do. I love the card, but holy cow, is this thing overpowered. Fits in well with the Sultai ramp decks, fits in with Simic ramp decks, fits in with mono green ramp decks. It doesn't matter. And then, oh, by the way, when it hits the playing battlefield, now you've got even more ramp, even more mana. The fact that it turns one of the lands into a 3/3 creature that has vigilance that is almost secondary to what her primary ability. She doesn't have to spend a single loyalty counter to get that ability to pull off. It's just her physically being on the table grants that ramping ability. The fact that this card survived banning through so many bans that we did through Standard shocks me, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know how Nissa survived this entire time and having not been banned. She is extremely powerful, even for 5 mana, because the 5 mana genuinely doesn't matter when you're playing a ramp deck and you get her down on turn 3. You've done it. You've played it against decks like that. How many times did you see that happen, where a turn 3 Nissa comes out and then all of a sudden you've got a 12/12 Hydra Crisis flying in the air and they've got a full deck of cards in their hands and you're like, wait, what? And then, oh, by the way, all of my lands are 3/3 creatures that once I hit the ultimate are indestructible. Like, almost, I genuinely, I hate using the word broken, but this card in the right deck, if this had come out in a different set, it may not nearly has been as bad as it was, but just having that static ability on there, just genuinely, everything from War of the Spark, like that did this, I thought was going to be problematic, and I genuinely feel that this one was. A problematic card, very happy she's rotating out of Standard. Love the character, but goodbye, Nissa, we shall see you in Historic. Alright, top 2. Can you guess them? Can you guess them? Pretty easy. Teferi Time Raveler. Now, I will freely admit, Teferi Time Raveler is not nearly as bad as his Dominaria companion, alter ego of himself, but this card, again, I don't play a ton of control. I see this a lot. I play aggro decks. He pulls off his -3. He dies the next turn. They basically pay 3 mana to draw a card and pop one of my things back to my hand for a turn. So this card never really necessarily bothered me as much. But anytime, again, going back to the same thing that we were talking about with Nissa in Standard, his static ability alone is way too strong. Each opponent can only cast spells only when they can cast sorceries. Do you know what that means? If you're playing a control deck, you can't counter anything he does anymore. For 3 mana, and he doesn't have to burn a loyalty counter to pull it off. It's severely powerful. The fact that he's I can cast sorceries at instant speed on my turn. Sure, whatever. I mean, that's strong, and the bounce back is okay. The fact that genuinely the main reason why he is as good as he is that static ability. It's the same argument with Nissa that it goes with Teferi. The fact that he has he doesn't have to pay a loyalty counter for that. He just does it. Just being on the table says, yeah, now you don't get to cast spells at instant speed on your turn. Have fun. If you're playing as another control deck, and I'm not a control player, but even if I were, like, how do you deal with that at that juncture? When everything's on your turn, and oh, by the way, they're in control colors, so they're countering everything that you're doing. It's way too strong, and it seems like every iteration of Teferi, although the current one that came with M21, it does give an extra turn, which I think is always a broken mechanic to start off with. I'm going to stand by that. I felt that Nexus of Fate was a broken card just because anything that grants the extra turn, regardless of mana cost, is going to be problematic. I don't know that he's necessarily problematic. I know a lot of people are running him, and maybe we'll see later on down the line, but this particular one, not nearly as broken as the Dominaria one. You got me on that one. I agree. The Dominaria one was way worse than this one. This one, still pretty bad. And again, personally, I had to put this one on the list, not because, again, I never felt that it necessarily affected me playing aggro decks like I do, but this is an annoying card if you're playing anything other than aggro. And the number 1. I can't believe with the number of bannings that we had in Standard during its lifespan that it survived each and every turn. Wilderness Reclamation. Thank God. Temur Reclamation is going away. I don't understand how this card got printed. I don't understand why it's not a legendary enchantment, so that you can only have one. The fact that it is an uncommon, making it dirt cheap for control players to pick up, and B, not legendary, meaning they can do this multiple times in a turn and just untap mana, untap mana, untap mana, and then, oh, I'm going to launch this gigantic fireball in your face and you're dead. Like, ridiculously broken card. Like, again, when this card was previewed, I saw this and went, well, that's broken. And everybody else in the community saw it too, which is the reason why Team of Reclamation, or some form of Reclamation, some iteration of Reclamation, has been in the top decks since this card came out. Between this, Growth Spiral, Hydra Crisis, like, I don't know how anyone didn't see this coming at Wizards and go, this is probably not a good idea. Again, the entire mechanic alone basically just doubles all the mana on the table just with having one of these on the table. Let's triple it. Let's quadruple it. Let's have 3 Wilderness Reclamations in play and just be able to have an unlimited amount of mana on turn 4. I'm being facetious with the unlimited, but genuinely, some of that does feel like I've gotten hit with expansion explosions in the 40s due to the amount of mana that they've been able to pull off and just do that on their turn at instant speed. Kind of broken, kind of done playing it, to be perfectly honest with you. So that's my list. I'm sticking to it. My top 10 cards that I will not be missing in standard. So let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the list. Cards that you're not looking forward to playing, or you're looking forward to not ever playing again when standard rotates. Let me know in the comments down below. And while you're there, if you feel I've earned it, hit the like and subscribe button. That'd be super helpful. And until next time, guys, we shall see you in the arena. This video was brought to you in no small part by our patrons. If you would like to help out the channel, go to www.patreon.com/oldguygamingmtga, and thank you for your support.